what inspired me to participate in the youth essay competition? Well, many years ago, I lived in India for about a year. During that time, our housekeeper had a child who lived with us as well in a sort of separate annex of the house. And there, I saw him for several months and helped him with his English learning. So he had a massive textbook. And in that textbook, he was constantly tracing letters, proudly sounding out different letters as I outlined in my essay, such as CAT to make cat. But he had no idea what a cat actually was or what the word meant. And he could hardly pronounce the word itself. And then I realized from that moment that he had learned letters, not a language, basically memorization without meaning. And that sparked awareness for me that functional literacy is different from just reading words. And I knew this wasn't an isolated story. I saw this as a systemic rural educational issue. My housekeepers weren't exactly the most well off in India, and they had to attend a public school rather than an elite private school, as some other Indian students may attend, where they got to achieve, where they got to receive top of the line English learning at these private schools, and at these public schools there wasn't just enough funding for every student to consistently be reinforced with their English teachings. I also remember him crouching. I also remember crouching next to him on the floor, both of us looking at the same page. He pointed to the letters and smiled when he got them right. But when I asked him to tell me what cat was, he just stared blankly. The moment stuck with me, and it was like he was climbing a ladder that was missing half the rungs. So that's what inspired me to get involved in English literacy learning for Indian students, Indian rural students. And when I found your essay competition, that's what inspired me to write the essay about this specific issue. So from this moment on, I wanted to help these children as much as I possibly could, and I started out with my housekeeper's son. And from there, after he got his reinforced English learning, I tried to find an NGO, a nonprofit in India that could help students on a mass scale throughout all of rural and underprivileged India, and I did find one. So my father's colleague from the Association for India's Development Aid started an NGO called Read a Story, and that NGO one person calling involves a one-on-one call with one underprivileged student who's learning English and another person of Indian descent or who can speak English fluently and knows at least decent English, knows at least decent Marathi, Hindi, and any other Hindi language. Sorry, Indian language. So, and that helped many. And based on his research, from starting from that point, he saw an 81% improvement in many students' English proficiency, which was amazing and a great start. And so from there, I was sort of inspired to help out. And I started out by signing up as a volunteer and volunteering 16 hours of my time to help read stories to this girl named Anjali. And my job was essentially just being a listener. They would read the story, and whenever they would have a slight mishap, I would just guide them in the right direction. And I worked with Anjali, and she went from picture books in the early stages to childhood classics by the end. And her story is just truly heartbreaking. She overcame family and economic struggles, walked to school for an hour, but later she got accepted into the Electrical Engineering Polytechnic in Pune, which is amazing. And it wouldn't, and her English proficiency must have definitely helped her from that point onward. And so I brought my nonprofit, which helps called Live to Learn, which helps underprivileged students in my local area in Portland, Oregon, with just more all of the academic concepts, including math and other science and other academic concepts into the picture. I plan to I recruited a couple of uh, I recruited some middle schoolers who were from Indian descent and knew at least Telugu, Tamil, Hindi, Marathi into this volunteer network, and I got them to serve as volunteers for Read a Story. And my plan is to keep expanding that network so that there'll be many more listeners here in the US that can help more children in India, like my housekeeper's son or like Anjali. And I think my favorite part about this NGO was I love the model. It was a low cost, scalable, phone based, and human centered model that could easily help a student learn English without any sort of massive economic or legal hurdles. I learned that listening can also be a form of philanthropy. It's not always about money. Sometimes it's just about giving your time. Oh, sorry, I had to repeat the question. So, what have I learned from this experience? I learned that listening is a form of philanthropy. It's not always about money. Sometimes it's just about giving your time, which I which is what I learned from this experience. And I was really surprised because you hear on the news that someone like Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos has this foundation, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and they give a bunch of money to help with many people abroad. What their work is great, what they're doing is amazing, but I'm just saying that sometimes having a lot of money is not the only way to help someone in need. And what I also learned is that I saw the confidence transformation in students when they could express themselves in English. And I understood the structural barriers, such as lack of trained teachers and rote learning, that, re- that require innovative, accessible solutions. And I also realized that my role can be a bridge, connecting people with resources, skills, and opportunities, as I'm trying to do now with my nonprofit. And finally, I learned that global inequities are solvable when solutions are simple, human focused, and scalable. The most striking thing I found was mostly the ASER's report on just the educational, uh, just the lack of English proficiency among rural students in India. I believe it was, I could double check, but there was a very low percentage of the amount of just sort of stable English learning that people could have. For example, fifth graders were struggling with basic third grade concepts. And really, it was just that at least 50% of many rural and tribal students in India were just sort of being left behind in their English studies. They didn't have the help at home to catch up, and the teachers were so inundated with the amount of students there were that they really just couldn't help much. There's just not enough funding to go around, and there's just not enough time to go around as well. And so that was the most striking thing to me. Another thing is just how important English proficiency is in the corporate world. For example, some research I also found was that only 7% of Indian engineering graduates are employable in global jobs due to a lack of English proficiency. That is a huge economic just sort of shortfall of India, and so I feel like that as a community we should really work on this to ensure that many people will be able to find jobs outside of India, and India's sort of cultural heritage can spread beyond just India's borders, and many people will be able to find more jobs without um, without having to worry about a lack of English proficiency. Marathi into this volunteer network, and I got them to serve as volunteers for Read a Story. And my plan is to keep expanding that network so that there'll be many more listeners here in the US that can help more children in India, like my housekeeper's son or like Anjali. And I think my favorite part about this NGO was I love the model. It was a low cost, scalable, phone based, and human centered model that could easily help a student learn English without any sort of massive economic or legal hurdles.